When a military confrontation appears ready to escalate, most observers expect one of two outcomes. Either diplomacy succeeds or force follows. But occasionally, events unfold in a way that fits neither explanation. Public rhetoric becomes more aggressive, military preparations intensify, and yet the anticipated strike never happens. That is precisely why I believe this episode deserves a deeper strategic examination. The immediate headlines focused on one question. Why were the planned strikes against Iran reportedly halted after days of escalating warnings? Public statements from Washington suggested diplomacy had opened a path forward, while officials in Tehran publicly maintained a different position regarding the status of negotiations. Rather than treating these contrasting narratives as a simple contradiction, I believe they reveal something more important, the gap between political messaging and strategic reality. Governments often communicate differently to domestic audiences, international partners, financial markets, and potential adversaries. Public announcements are therefore only one layer of a much larger strategic process. To understand why military decisions change so quickly, we must examine the underlying incentives shaping those decisions. One of those incentives is sustainability. Modern conflicts are no longer determined solely by the size of an army or the number of aircraft in the sky. They increasingly depend on industrial capacity, production timelines, logistics, and the ability to sustain operations over months rather than days. Defensive missile systems, precision-guided interceptors, and advanced air defense networks require years of manufacturing and significant financial investment. Once these resources begin declining faster than they can be replenished, military planning becomes constrained regardless of political rhetoric. This introduces what I describe as an asymmetric ratchet. Unlike conventional battles where both sides exchange comparable resources, asymmetric competition forces one side to expend increasingly expensive defensive capabilities against comparatively cheaper offensive systems. Every interception may prevent immediate damage, but it also consumes assets that cannot be rapidly replaced. Over time, the strategic challenge shifts from winning individual engagements to sustaining the overall defense posture itself. Yet military economics alone cannot explain everything. Technology is changing the balance in ways that are often overlooked. Modern battlefields increasingly reward integrated surveillance, precision targeting, electronic warfare, and cost-efficient defensive systems rather than overwhelming firepower alone. Small technological shifts can alter operational risk far more dramatically than increases in troop numbers or conventional weapons. For me, this is the central lesson. The question is no longer simply whether a nation possesses superior military capability. The more important question is whether it can maintain that capability over time while adapting to an opponent that continuously changes the cost of confrontation. In modern geopolitics, endurance has become just as important as strength. The second dimension of this crisis extends well beyond military operations. It is about whether geopolitical competition can alter the economic foundations that sustain national power. Every conflict eventually reaches a point where logistics become as important as strategy. Energy markets, shipping routes, financial systems, and industrial production begin influencing outcomes just as much as military planning. When uncertainty grows across key maritime corridors, governments are forced to calculate not only battlefield risks, but also the long-term economic consequences of every decision. This is why the Strait of Hormuz remains central to understanding the broader picture. It is more than a narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to international markets. It is a strategic artery through which a significant share of global energy supplies moves every day. Any disruption, whether physical or psychological, immediately affects oil prices, insurance premiums, commercial shipping, and investor confidence. Markets often respond to expectations long before events unfold on the ground. Another important factor is strategic partnerships. Modern competition increasingly involves technology, manufacturing capacity, financial infrastructure, and international trade rather than military power alone. Nations strengthen their strategic position not only through alliances, but also through supply chains, payment systems, industrial cooperation, and long-term economic relationships. These networks quietly shape geopolitical influence while receiving far less public attention than military deployments. This leads to a broader question. Can a major power sustain prolonged strategic competition if the economic cost of maintaining deterrence continues rising faster than the political benefits it produces? History suggests that military superiority alone has rarely guaranteed long-term success. Endurance depends equally on industrial resilience, technological adaptation, and the ability to preserve public confidence while avoiding unnecessary strategic overextension. Diplomacy therefore becomes more than negotiation. It becomes a tool for managing time itself. Every pause, every announcement, every public statement influences financial markets, alliance coordination, commercial behavior, and domestic political expectations. Strategic communication is increasingly part of the battlefield. Ultimately, I believe this episode demonstrates a larger transformation taking place in international politics. The balance of power is no longer determined solely by the number of aircraft, missiles, or military bases a nation possesses. Increasingly, it depends on who can sustain economic resilience, protect critical supply chains, adapt to technological change, and maintain strategic flexibility under prolonged pressure. In the years ahead, geopolitical competition will likely be decided less by dramatic military victories than by which countries can better integrate economic strength, industrial capacity, diplomacy, and credible deterrence into a coherent long-term strategy. The most important lesson is simple. Modern power is measured not only by the ability to project force, but by the ability to sustain it. In an era of interconnected economies and evolving technologies, endurance has become the decisive strategic advantage.